All right, so this is part 2 of the Royal Caribbean stand-up surfing test. We're going to show you how carving is actually done on a Flowrider, and then we're going to show you the 2 biggest mistakes that people make when taking this test and how to make sure that they never happen to you. So let's go check it out. Now, the next thing that the Royal Caribbean riders were telling me was that once you push yourself in, then you have to show basic control of the board. Basic control of the board means moving yourself back and forth across the wave a few times. Then a lot of riders added in that they're going to ask you to repeat that process one more time just to show them that the first time wasn't a fluke. Now, steering yourself side to side across the wave is really just carving back and forth at its most basic level. So what we're going to show here is the most basic carving as possible to get that blue band, and then we're going to work on that more advanced carving later. Now, to move your board across the wave requires 2 things that you need to do to your board. One is that you need to get your board a little diagonal in the direction that you want to go. So we want to go that way. And then the second is that since you steer a flow board with the edges, you need to get your edges just a tiny little bit into the water. When you break it down, those 2 things are all that you really need for carving. And they're both done simultaneously. So it's kind of like turning an airplane. With an airplane, you need to get the plane a little diagonal, and then you need to bank it into the turn. That banking it into the turn is like digging your edges in. So let's get into some of those details. Let's talk about edging first, which is really easy. If you want to carve front side, which is off in that direction, then you have to bend your ankles a little bit and apply more weight to your heels to keep this toe side edge up. If you want to carve backside, which is off in that direction, then what you need to do is you need to get more weight onto your toes and keep that heel side edge up. It's really a very slight tilt of the board, just enough to keep your front edges up so they don't get caught in the current. And it's also going to allow the water to come under the board and hit those far side edges to turn. Now, getting your board diagonal is a bit more complicated. The way to get your board diagonal is to push your back foot out to one side by rotating your hips and pushing your tail foot out to the side. Your front foot really doesn't do anything. It doesn't move at all. It just acts like a pivot point to push your back foot around. Now, because you're floating on the water, to be able to push your back foot and hip out in one direction, we need to do a counteracting movement with our arms and shoulders in the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the board on top of the spinner, and we'll show you what those motions are. So we got the spinner here. I'm going to put the board on top of it with that. This right here is the pivot point. Once again, our front foot just pivots. So we're going to put that right on top, and then we're going to get our back foot on the back. Now, first thing, your head never moves. There's this old saying that you move your head in the direction you want to go, you look where you want to go, and the rest of your body will follow. That does not apply to side carving. Keep looking straight out to the side of the Flowrider where you pushed off from, like we talked about before. Keep your shoulders square to the front of the Flowrider, and that'll help prevent you from spinning out of control. All right, so for a front side carve, which means twisting your hips and your back foot in a counterclockwise motion towards the heel side, you need to initiate that with a quick, precise motion, moving your arms in the opposite clockwise direction. The 2 motions are going to be equally proportional to each other, and they're going to occur at exactly the same time. So my hips are going to go this way, which means my arms have to counteract and swing in the opposite direction. So from here, it just looks like this. Now, to turn back in the opposite direction, we do the exact opposite motion, which means my arms are going to come this way as my hips turn this way. So the motion back And then it just keeps going on from there. You just keep shifting back and forth, back and forth. Now, combine this motion with a little bit of edging on your board, and that's all there is to carving on a flowboard. Now, let me pull a few clips off the internet of people who have great carving just to show you this point. The first rider that I want to show you is a guy who's at an intermediate level. Take note that his head never moves. Also, watch how he moves his front arm and the nose of the board in opposite directions to get the board to turn at the angle that he wants it to go. Now, the other rider that I want to show you is this woman who I have no idea who she is, but she also has great intermediate carving, but less aggressive than the first rider that I showed you. Notice that her head doesn't move also, and she rotates her board and hips in one direction while her shoulders and arms rotate in the equal and opposite direction. She's standing straight up, not yet leaning into the turns like the more advanced riders. Now, for the blue belt test, we're going to keep the carving like this, but even shallower than this. Turn your board diagonally as little as possible, and you'll be countering with your arms and shoulders as little as possible just to equal the movement. Your board is going to remain very flat. You're only digging in your edges just a slight bit, which is enough to get the board moving in the direction that you're carving. Keep it as simple as possible with as little movement as possible for this test. Okay, so that's really it as far as the skills that you'll need to pass this test. I do want to go over the two most common situations that people mess up on and how you should handle those. The most common scenario that beginning riders fall from is when they open up their body towards the bottom of the Flowrider and then they catch an edge and they fall. The best thing to do is to not let this happen in the first place. You want to keep your shoulders square to the front of the Flowrider. So if you're an absolute beginner, keep your head looking straight to the wall that you pushed in off of, or you can look just a slight little bit in front of it. As you start to feel more comfortable, you can start looking more forward at an angle. Also, keep your tail foot all the way to the back of the board and put about 70% of your weight on the back foot. That will keep the back of the board more dug into the water, so there's less chance of it turning sideways. If the weight on your feet is about 50-50, kind of flat on the water, then the board tends to unintentionally spin around more. So keep the back dug in. Now, if you do find yourself starting to spin and open up, the easiest way to counter this is to just turn your hips so that your hips go back to parallel with the water current. To do this, you're going to have to do that counter motion with your arms in the opposite direction, as you've already seen done in this video. This is a little counterintuitive because you're already spinning in that direction, and now you need to throw your arms in that wrong direction also, which is the direction you don't want to go. But it's that counter motion that will get your hips to go in the opposite direction to stop the spin. Here's a video of a beginner doing this motion. I don't think he even knows what he's doing, but he's doing the motion correctly just by instinct. A second method to try to straighten yourself back out is to bend down and put your backhand in the water on your toe side and somewhat in back of you. You can either put your hand directly into the current or into the water that sprays up behind you. Either way, it'll put pressure on your hand and start to spin you back to straighten you out. It's like a rudder on a boat. There are a lot of riders that mention this method and like it. Whichever method works best for you, do it as early as possible once you feel yourself turning, and you'll have much better results. And last, and we talked about this before, make sure to lean back and get 70% of your weight on your back foot because the current is super strong and wants to pull the rug out from under you and send you flying face forward. It's an unexpectedly strong amount of current, so get ready for it and lean back. All right, so that's really everything that you need to know to take the stand-up surfing test. I'm going to leave you with a video of Nick Vitani taking the actual test. Nick's a really good rider, and I want to thank him for sending me a lot of great video to use in this instructional. Nick actually has two fantastic Royal Caribbean YouTube channels. One of them is a general channel on Royal Caribbean cruising, and the other is about gambling on ships. Go check them out. Nick is also a great flow riding resource because he pretty much lives on these ships and can guide you as to which ships have the best flow riders, because there are good and bad ones. And he'll also tell you when the best times are to book them. When I eventually take a Flowrider cruise, I'm gonna book it through Nick because he can also get the best deals that are out there. All right, good luck with the stand-up Flowrider test and have a great cruise.